My sister Cordelia was about to become lunch for a 20-foot python, and I had exactly 30 seconds to decide whether to save her life or run. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. The camera opens on my trembling hands, still clutching my Nikon. The lens cracked from when I threw myself behind that acacia tree. There's blood on my khaki field shirt, not mine, thank God, but from the desperate struggle that just ended 20 minutes ago. The African sun is setting behind me, casting long shadows across the Masai Mara, and you can hear the distant roar of lions in the background. But all I can think about is how close I came to losing the most important person in my world. See, Cordelia isn't just my little sister. She's my research partner, my best friend, and the only family I have left since our dad died in a wildlife accident 5 years ago. We've been documenting lion behavior together for 3 months now, living in a research station that's basically a glorified tent with solar panels. Most people think we're crazy for choosing this life, sleeping under mosquito nets, showering with a bucket of lukewarm water, eating canned beans for dinner more nights than I care to admit. But we're not just here for the adventure. This work means everything to us. Our father, Dr. Nathan Rivers, spent his entire career studying African wildlife before that elephant trampled him during a research expedition in Botswana. Cordelia was only 19 when it happened. She blamed herself for weeks because she was supposed to be with him that day but stayed behind with food poisoning. That's why when I saw that massive python wrapping itself around her leg this afternoon, every protective instinct I inherited from our father kicked into overdrive. Cordelia has always been the brave one, the one who walks up to a wounded buffalo while I'm calculating escape routes. She's got this fearless compassion that makes her an incredible marine biologist, but it also makes her do things like try to rescue a trapped lioness from a 20-foot African rock python. The truth is, 30 seconds felt like 30 hours. In that moment, with my sister's life hanging in the balance and a mother lioness fighting for her own survival, I had to make a choice that would either save us both or kill us all. And honestly, there was never really a choice at all. 3 months ago, when Cordelia and I first arrived at this research station, I thought I understood what isolation meant. I was wrong. Our base camp is a collection of weathered canvas tents and solar-powered equipment sitting in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by 580 square miles of raw African wilderness. The nearest human settlement is a 4-hour drive on roads that barely qualify as paths. Most days, the only sounds we hear are wind through the acacia trees, the distant calls of wildlife, and each other's voices. But we've never been happier. Our daily routine became a perfectly choreographed dance within weeks. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., I'd wake up to the smell of Cordelia brewing coffee over our camp stove, humming some old song Dad used to sing while he organized his field notes. She'd have already checked the weather reports and mapped out our tracking route for the day. I'd pack my camera equipment while she loaded her behavioral observation gear and the portable radio that connected us to the outside world. By sunrise, we'd be in our battered Land Rover, bouncing across the savannah toward whatever lion pride we were documenting that week. Cordelia would sit in the passenger seat with her notebook balanced on her knees, sketching family trees of the different prides and noting behavioral patterns that most people would never notice. She could tell you which lioness was the primary hunter, which cubs belonged to which mother, and how the social hierarchy shifted based on food availability and seasonal changes. I focused on the photography, capturing moments that told the story of survival out here. Through my lens, I watched nature's raw honesty play out every single day. Cubs learning to hunt, mothers protecting their young. The endless cycle of life and death that makes this place both beautiful and brutal. The National Geographic assignment was supposed to last 6 months, documenting how climate change affects lion family structures. For both of us, though, this project represented something much deeper. Every photograph I took, every behavioral note Cordelia recorded, was our way of continuing Dad's work. He'd spent 25 years studying African wildlife before that accident in Botswana. His research papers were still being cited by conservation groups worldwide, and we were determined to add our own chapter to his legacy. That morning started like any other. except Cordelia was practically vibrating with excitement. She'd been tracking a particular lioness we nicknamed Amara for the past 6 weeks. Amara was special because she'd given birth to 3 cubs just as the dry season was reaching its peak, when food was scarce and survival rates for newborns dropped dramatically. "Today's the day," Cordelia announced as we loaded the truck. "I've been watching Amara's den site through binoculars for 3 days. The cubs are old enough to start venturing out, but they haven't emerged yet. If we can document their first exploration, it'll be incredible footage." I checked my equipment one more time, making sure the telephoto lens was clean and the backup batteries were charged. "How far out is the den site?" "About 2 hours northeast, near that cluster of kopjes by the seasonal watering hole." She paused, looking at the gray clouds building on the horizon. "We should have plenty of time before that storm hits." Our radio had been acting up all week, crackling with static and losing signal at random intervals. I'd made a mental note to request a replacement, but like everything else out here, it would take weeks to arrive. For now, we'd have to rely on our experience and each other. As we drove deeper into the wilderness that morning, neither of us could have predicted that by sunset, we'd be fighting for our lives alongside the very animals we came here to protect. We found Amara at 3:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I was checking my camera's timestamp when Cordelia grabbed my arm so hard I thought she'd broken it. "Oh my God," she whispered, and I followed her gaze through the binoculars. What we saw will haunt me forever. Amara, the powerful lioness we'd been tracking for weeks, was trapped in the coils of the largest African rock python I'd ever seen. The snake had to be at least 20 feet long and thick as a telephone pole, its diamond-patterned body wrapped around her torso and back legs like steel cables. Her front paws were still free, clawing desperately at the ground, but every breath she took was shallower than the last. The python had been slowly suffocating her for hours. We could tell because the ground around them was torn up from her struggle, and there were deep gouges in the earth where her claws had fought for purchase. Her golden coat was matted with mud and blood, and her tongue was starting to turn blue from lack of oxygen. "We have to do something," Cordelia said, already reaching for her equipment pack. "Cord, no." I grabbed her wrist. "That python could crush a buffalo. We need to call this in and wait for the wildlife rangers." She held up our radio, static crackling uselessly from the speaker. "With what? This thing hasn't worked properly in days, and you know the rangers are 3 hours away, minimum." Her voice was rising, that stubborn tone I recognized from childhood arguments. "By the time they get here, she'll be dead." From somewhere in the nearby brush, we heard the most heartbreaking sound in nature, the desperate cries of cubs calling for their mother. 3 tiny voices, maybe 8 weeks old, hidden in a thicket about 50 yards away. They were old enough to survive a few days without milk, but not old enough to hunt. If Amara died, they would starve. "Listen to them," Cordelia said, tears streaming down her face. "They don't understand why their mom isn't coming. They just know she's not answering their calls." The python sensed our presence and lifted its massive head, tongue flicking out to taste our scent. Its eyes were cold and calculating, prehistoric intelligence sizing us up as either threat or opportunity. When it shifted position slightly, tightening its grip on Amara, she let out a sound I'd never heard a lion make before, a weak, strangled whimper that barely qualified as a growl. I did a quick inventory of our supplies. 1 tranquilizer gun with 2 darts, rated for animals up to 400 pounds. The python had to weigh at least 200 pounds, maybe more. A machete that suddenly seemed ridiculously small, a flare gun for emergencies, and a first aid kit that would be useless against a 20-foot snake. "This is insane, Cordelia. We're photographers and researchers, not wildlife rescue specialists." "Dad would have tried," she said quietly, and that stopped me cold. She was right. Our father had risked his life dozens of times to help animals in distress. It's actually what killed him in the end. But he'd also saved countless animals that way, including a mother elephant and her calf that are probably still roaming Botswana today because of his intervention. The storm clouds were getting darker and the wind was picking up. If it started raining, our visibility would drop to almost nothing, and the muddy ground would make any rescue attempt 10 times more dangerous. The python would have even better camouflage in the dim light, and Amara would have even less strength to fight. "We have maybe an hour before that storm hits," I said, more to myself than to Cordelia. "Then we have an hour to save her life." She started walking toward the trapped lioness, and I realized with growing horror that my little sister was about to do something that would either make us heroes or get us both killed. Watching Cordelia walk toward that python was like watching someone step off a cliff in slow motion. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to tackle her, drag her back to the truck, and drive away before we both became wildlife statistics. But there was something in her posture, the way she moved with quiet determination, that reminded me so powerfully of our father that I couldn't bring myself to stop her. "Cord, wait," I called out, jogging to catch up. "If we're doing this, we need a plan." She turned around, relief flooding her face. "You're not going to try to stop me?" I should. But Dad always said the worst thing you can do in the field is abandon your research partner. I looked at the tranquilizer gun in her hands, then at the massive snake coiled around Amara. "What's your plan?" Cordelia had always been the strategic thinker between us. While I operated on instinct and emotion, she approached problems like a scientist. "Pythons are ambush predators," she said, her voice steadying as she shifted into research mode. "They're not designed for prolonged fights with multiple opponents. If we can confuse it, make it think we're a bigger threat than we actually are, it might release Amara and retreat. And if it decides we look like easier prey than a half-dead lioness, then we better make sure our first shot counts." She handed me the flare gun. "I'm going to circle around to get a clear shot at its head with the tranquilizer. You stay on this side and create a distraction. If things go wrong, fire that flare straight up and run for the truck." I stared at the flare gun, its bright orange, plastic suddenly feeling like the most important object in the world. "What if you miss?" "I won't miss." She checked the tranquilizer gun's safety, her hands steady despite everything. "Remember when Dad taught us to shoot clay pigeons at Grandpa's farm? I never missed then either." The memory hit me hard. Cordelia at 15, squinting down the barrel of Dad's old shotgun, methodically destroying every target he threw. She had this natural ability to slow down time when she concentrated, to block out everything except her target. If anyone could make an impossible shot under pressure, it was her. "The python's head is maybe 18 inches wide," I said, calculating angles. "You'll have to get within 30 feet for the tranquilizer to be effective." "I know." She was already moving, using the scattered acacia trees for cover as she worked her way around to Amara's left side. "Give me 2 minutes to get in position, then start making noise." Those 2 minutes stretched like hours. I watched Cordelia disappear into the brush, then focused on Amara. The lioness was still conscious, but barely. Her breathing was so shallow I could hardly see her ribs moving. The python had positioned itself perfectly, keeping its vulnerable head away from Amara's claws, while maintaining crushing pressure on her torso. From their hiding spot in the thicket, the cubs continued their heartbreaking calls. They were getting more desperate, more frantic. One of them, braver than the others, actually ventured out far enough for me to see its spotted coat before ducking back into the safety of the thorns. I started with small rocks, throwing them at trees near the python, to test its reaction. The massive head swiveled toward each impact, tongue flicking out constantly now. It was definitely aware of me, calculating whether I was worth the effort of an attack. When I threw a larger stone that landed just 10 feet away, the python shifted, its entire body position, and I heard Amara gasp as the coils loosened slightly. That's when I realized our plan had a fatal flaw. Every time the python moved to track my position, it readjusted its grip on Amara. Each movement was potentially crushing her further, and I had no way to warn Cordelia without alerting the snake to her position. I was still grappling with this horrible realization when I heard Cordelia's voice, barely above a whisper but clear as a bell. "Now." I threw the biggest rock I could find, aiming for a spot just behind the python's head. The impact made a dull thud against the hard-packed earth, and the massive snake's attention snapped toward me instantly. Its head rose 3 feet off the ground, swaying slightly as it tried to determine if I was prey or predator. That's when Cordelia took her shot. The tranquilizer dart hit the python square in the neck, just behind its skull. For one perfect moment, I thought we'd won. The snake's head jerked back and its coils loosened around Amara enough for her to take a real breath. But pythons don't die quickly, and this one was far from finished. Instead of retreating, the python did something that still gives me nightmares. It released Amara completely and launched itself toward Cordelia with terrifying speed, 20 feet of pure muscle moving like a striking whip across the savannah. Cordelia tried to run, but pythons can move at 15 miles per hour when they want something, and she was maybe 30 feet away. I watched in horror as those massive coils wrapped around my sister's left leg and hip, yanking her off her feet like she weighed nothing. She hit the ground hard but managed to keep hold of the tranquilizer gun. The second dart was still loaded, but the python was already positioning itself for a killing grip around her torso. "The head!" I screamed, running toward them. "Shoot! The head!" But the python was too smart for that. It kept its head away from Cordelia while its body did the deadly work. I could see the muscles contracting, starting the slow process of suffocation that had nearly killed Amara. Cordelia's face was already turning red from the pressure around her ribs. That's when something impossible happened. Amara, the lioness, we thought was dying, somehow found the strength to attack. She launched herself at the python's tail section with a roar that shook the ground under my feet. Her powerful jaws clamped down on the snake's body about 6 feet from where it was crushing Cordelia. The python's head whipped around in confusion and fury, suddenly dealing with threats from 2 directions. "Now, Cord!" I shouted. My sister, even with a python crushing her ribs, managed to angle the tranquilizer gun toward the snake's head and pull the trigger. The second dart hit it right between the eyes. The python's grip loosened immediately, not from the tranquilizer taking effect, but from pure shock and disorientation. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the machete from our gear pack and started hacking at the coils around Cordelia's body. Python skin is incredibly tough, but the blade was sharp enough to cut through to muscle. Every slash made the snake loosen its grip a little more, and between Amara's attack on its tail and my assault on its midsection, the python finally decided we weren't worth the fight. The tranquilizer was starting to take effect now. The python's movements became sluggish, uncoordinated. It released Cordelia completely and began retreating toward the rocky outcropping where it had probably been hunting before encountering Amara. Within minutes, the massive snake was unconscious, coiled, harmlessly among the stones. Cordelia sat up slowly, gasping and checking her ribs for breaks. "Are you hurt?" she asked me first, which was so typically her that I almost started crying. "Am I hurt?" "You just got crushed by a giant snake." "I'm okay," she said, though she was definitely favoring her left side. But look at Amara. The lioness had collapsed, again after her heroic effort, but her breathing was much stronger now. She was watching us with those intelligent golden eyes, and I swear I saw gratitude in them. More incredibly, her 3 cubs had emerged from their hiding place and were approaching cautiously, drawn by their mother's scent and the absence of the python's threatening presence. The oldest cub, a little female with distinctive ear tufts, walked right up to Cordelia and sniffed her outstretched hand. For a moment that felt like forever, human and lion regarded each other with mutual respect and recognition. "She saved us," Cordelia whispered, never taking her eyes off Amara. "She could have used her freedom to escape, but she stayed to fight. For me. Family," I said, understanding flooding through me like sunlight. Family. 6 months later, I'm standing in the exact same spot where we almost lost everything. The seasonal rains have transformed the landscape into something lush and green, nothing like the dry, desperate place where we fought for our lives. But things haven't changed. Amara is here with us again, and this time she's brought company. The veterinary team from Nairobi arrived 8 hours after we fired that emergency flare. By then, Cordelia had managed to stabilize Amara using basic first aid techniques she'd learned in marine rescue training, while I documented everything with my camera. The python, thankfully, had slithered away once the tranquilizer wore off, relocating to a territory about 15 miles south where it wouldn't encounter any more lion families. Amara's recovery took 3 months of intensive care at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. 2 broken ribs, severe muscle damage, and dehydration that nearly killed her. But lionesses are incredibly resilient. and she had something most patients don't have. 3 cubs waiting for her return. The rehabilitation team told us that maternal instinct is often the strongest motivator for recovery they've ever seen. Cordelia spent most of those 3 months at the rehab center too, not as a patient but as a volunteer. The python had bruised her ribs badly and left her with some impressive scars, but nothing that wouldn't heal. What changed was her understanding of what she wanted to do with her life. Watching Amara fight through physical therapy, seeing her determination to get strong enough to return to her cubs, inspired Cordelia to shift her focus from research to active conservation work. "I realized something that day," she told me last week over dinner at our new research station. "Dad always said the most important thing about studying animals was learning how to help them when they needed it most. But I never really understood what that meant until I watched Amara choose to save me instead of saving herself." The footage I captured that day changed both our careers. The video of a mother lioness risking her life to help rescue the human who was trying to save her went viral within hours of National Geographic posting it. Not in a cheap, sensational way, but in a way that made people understand the complex, emotional lives of animals and the deep connections possible between species. We've received funding for 5 more years of research, but now our focus is different. Instead of just documenting animal behavior, we're developing intervention protocols for wildlife in crisis situations. Cordelia has become an expert in emergency animal psychology, understanding how trauma affects wild animals and how to help them recover. I've expanded beyond photography into creating educational content that shows people why individual animals matter, not just as representatives of their species, but as individuals with their own personalities and family bonds. Today, watching Amara play with her new litter of cubs, I'm struck by how much we all learned from that terrifying afternoon. Amara learned that sometimes accepting help doesn't mean showing weakness. Cordelia learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite your fear when someone you care about is in danger. And I learned that some moments matter more than capturing the perfect shot. But the most important lesson came from watching Amara's original 3 cubs, now strong juveniles, approach us without fear. They remember us, not as the humans who disrupted their lives, but as the ones who brought their mother back to them. When the youngest one, the female with the distinctive ear tufts, walks up and rubs against Cordelia's leg, I understand something profound about the nature of gratitude and memory in the animal kingdom. "You know what Dad would say if he could see this?" Cordelia asks, watching the cubs play. "That family isn't just about blood," I reply, finishing the thought he shared with us so many times growing up. "It's about who you're willing to fight for." Amara looks up at us from where she's grooming her newest cub, and in her golden eyes, I see the same recognition that passed between her and Cordelia that day. We're not just researchers documenting her life anymore. We're part of her extended family, connected by a moment of mutual rescue that proved love and loyalty exist far beyond the boundaries of species. Some bonds, I've learned, are forged in crisis and strengthened by survival. They last forever. They